As this README file continues to grow, you can see how we're going to have more and more sections and we're going to have more and more pages of information potentially in this README file. One nice feature of using Rmarkdown is it actually gives you the capacity to build dynamic HTML. This is just a static HTML page right now, but you can do dynamic HTML, which means you can have interactive elements on this page. And one interactive element that's really nice to have is a way to quickly navigate through the metadata through some sort of table of contents. So Rmarkdown is a tool that allows you to automatically generate dynamic HTML that's ultimately using JavaScript. But we're going to do it via R code. And it's a pretty simple in this case in terms of getting this particular rendering to an HTML document to have a table of contents that is interactable. So the way you do that is instead of telling it an HTML document string is what we pass to this output format argument, we want to pass it an HTML document object. And the way we create that object is using the R Markdown HTML object or document function. So this is a function we can call, and we can give it arguments to give us some control over how it creates this HTML document. So if I do a help on HTML document, this is from the R Markdown package, and it tells me all of the different arguments I can pass to HTML document to have some sort of control over how the HTML document is created. So I'm going to break this into multiple lines. So there's a few arguments that I want to change. And one of the main ones is notice that the default value for this TOC argument is false. So if I don't do anything else, it's going to create an HTML document without a table of contents. Well, I want to change that. So first thing I want to do is pass the argument TOC equals true instead of false. Then there are things that I can do to control the table of contents. For example, I can set the total number or the total depth of the table of contents. In other words, the number of heading levels that I want to see. In this case, I want to see all of them, and I don't have any that go deeper than 3. So I'm going to say TOC depth of 3. Then I can set options of how the TOC is represented. By default, it's just going to give a TOC at the top of the document with links in the TOC that will let you move to different parts of the page. But there's also a cool feature called TOC float. That means the TOC or the table of contents is always going to be visible. It's floating in the same spot relative to the rest of the page that's moving past it. So if I say TOC float, I can pass TOC float a list of options. And two options that it can take are the collapsed option. And this is just telling it whether it's collapsed or expanded at first. And that means whether you can see all of the subsections or not. I like it to be nice and clean where all I see is the top level and I don't see the subsections unless I click on it. And also whether you want the table of contents to show up when you print it. Now, I'm not planning on printing this, but I usually set that to false because it generally is not something that looks very good when you print. And it doesn't really help with a printed version of the document. And finally, there are different themes you can use for the graphical representation in terms of the colors and the style of the text and everything. Simplex is the one I use. There are lots of different themes to choose from, which I believe you can get some information for. I can find the theme. Here it is. This will tell you how to get to the different themes that might be available. Simplex is just the one that I tend to use. So these are all information that gets passed via an HTML document to Pandoc as part of our Markdown for doing the job of creating the dynamic HTML, or what will now be dynamic HTML. So if I save this and I rerun it, I'm sorry. Yes, I did. This is, yes, my rendering document. I can go back and refresh this. Now you see I have this floating table of contents. Floating meaning that it's going to stay in the same pace while the rest of the text is going to float past it. And I can just quickly navigate each section and subsection. And notice, because I'm setting it to be collapsed, the subsections only show up when I'm highlighting the section. This just lets me quickly navigate to this. Now this is going to get to be a pretty long file, so this gets to be pretty useful for quickly getting around and finding things without having to manually scroll up and down.